welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to, well, near the end of this year's virtual conference, Making Data Good Society, the joint event with the BCS and DAMA UK. So let me just share my screen. There you go. You can see here we have worked our way through this whole agenda this week, and we have made our way through so many different topics, but we've got all the way round to the end, and we are now coming to the close of our sessions. So we have just this one session today, and then we will be having a panel debate with a number of our speakers, including Nick from today, this afternoon for our final session. So please do join us then. And if, any questions you've got for Nick, ask this morning, but I'm sure there's going to be a really great debate this afternoon. Before I get on to the rest of the housekeeping, I wanted to just share with you, as part of doing this event this year, the BCS has kindly arranged to have a discount in the BCS bookshops for all data-related books that they have. So you can get 30% off list prices using the link there. And if you want that, just contact us and we can get that to you afterwards. So, we're really grateful you've joined us today. This event is co-sponsored by the BCS Data Management Specialist Group and DAMA UK. For any of you that don't know what we do, the BCS Data Management Specialist Group promotes the better use of data by running data-related events and supporting the development of data-related standards and guidance. Now, I'm Nicola Askham. I think I forgot to say that. I'm actually on the committee of DAMA UK, and DAMA is the go-to organisation for data management professionals. And our mission is to nurture a community of data professionals in the UK who champion the value of data management. So, it's been a really, really great week. We always have a joint event every year, our two organizations. But last year and this year, unfortunately, it's had to be virtual. But what we found is that by having this series of webinars in 1 week, we've had an amazing range of speakers. And we're really, really grateful for everybody for giving up their time and for everybody coming to join us. So, before we start, I just wanted to let you know we're recording this session today, which I'm sure you all got the notification when you joined, and it will be available on the BCS member group YouTube channel and the DAMA website after the event. Now, one more introduction before we go on to introducing Nick as our speaker, is we're really lucky to have journalism with us today, and I think this asks the question we've already had in the chat. Journalism, the guys from there are amazing. They're capturing the events this week in a fun and engaging digital visualization, and they produce the visual agenda that I just showed. But as we're doing these presentations, they are working on the fly. I don't know if we can spotlight. Matt has already made a start. And we will actually show you his progress later as we go, but he's capturing everything that Nick tells us. So there we go. We've got a kind of starter there to go. And as Nick talks, Matt will be capturing that as we go. So you are all muted, but we would love you to ask lots of questions of Nick. So put your questions in the chat box, and we've allowed about 20 minutes at the end, and we'll ask them to Nick for you at the end. So make sure you get your question in. So the next and most important thing is to introduce Nick Soros. Nick Soros has been working as a data scientist for more than 8 years, and he spent his last 3 years working for Wellcome Trust, initially to set up and lead the data science team. And currently he's the technical lead for the development of a unified classification system for the organization. Now, prior to that, he worked for a couple of startups in different sectors. Before working as a data scientist, Nick was studying and doing research at Imperial College. Now, Nick's representing DataKind today, and he's been a member of DataKind UK for more than 5 years and has participated in a couple of data dive projects as a volunteer and data ambassador. And he's currently helping DataKind UK to scope future dives, and he's also a member of their ethics committee. So I can't wait to hear what you've got to say, Nick. So I'm going to shut up and hand over to you, and we can't wait to hear everything you've got to say.
Hello, thanks very much for the introduction. Let me start by sharing my screen. So can go here. I hope you will be able to see my slides soon. If that's not the case, someone should let me know.
We just can see the blank screen at the moment. I think it's just, we can see your speaker notes this time, Nick.
Okay, let me stop and do, I think what we did last time and it worked was this option. 1 second. Okay, let's go again.
Perfect.
Cool. So, thanks very much for the introduction and for inviting DataKind and as a member of DataKind me. I'm Nick Soros. As Nicola said, I've been with DataKind for about 7 years. Started as a volunteer and then became a data ambassador in one of the events that DataKind organizes, the so-called data dives, which I'll tell you more about in a few slides. And in the last 3 years, I'm part of the committees that DataKind has. I started from the ethics committee, where I've been for 2 years, and then I moved into the scoping committee, which is the one that scopes the projects that DataKind organizes. So what I want to tell you about is how we use data science essentially in DataKind to help other charities. I want to tell you a little bit about DataKind and what we do. Very briefly mention what data science is, even though I'm sure it needs no introduction in this audience. Then there's a section that where I'm going to tell you some. I'm going to present some examples of projects we've done, which I hope you will find interesting. And lastly, there are some tips from what we've learned on working with other charities that I plan to share. It might not be as relevant to this audience, but I think also for data scientists, when they start in a new place, there are some things that possibly you can take off. So who is DataKind? You might have heard of us. We're a charity. We help build data science capacity in other charities. We do that in a number of ways. We have office hours for charities. These are our drop-in sessions where charities can come in and ask us questions. We do organize data dives, which are the things that we're mostly famous for. These are weekend events, kind of like hackathons, where our community comes together to help a charity. We also do data corps projects. These are longer term projects than data dives, but along the same lines, we pair volunteers with a charity. And we've worked with a couple of charities over the years that we've been active, some of which you can see in the slide. They vary from very small to very big and across a couple of different areas, such as mental health services, homelessness, and others. So data dives, which are the thing that we're mostly known for, is what you can see here in this slide. They used to be physical events, and I hope they will be very soon again. As you can see on the top right and the top left, a lot of our volunteers were gathering up for this weekend hackathon event, some people from the charity and from DataKind as well, and worked on one project. But of course, with the pandemic, we had to transition into a more a remote digital version of it. You can see in the top right, but all of which is to say we didn't stop doing these events. So what do we do exactly? I briefly mentioned it, just some more context. We have this office hours offering where charities can come in and ask us questions. This is a more light touch way to help. Questions vary, so they can ask us about a particular tool they've heard of, or thinking about using, for example, Tableau or something else. They can ask specific questions about their data or how they can use their data to help the people they serve. or they can be interested in participating in one of the dives and want to know more about how to fill the application or what they can tackle within the weekend. So there are a number of our volunteers that sort of dedicate their time to the office hours. Sometimes this is a one-off interaction with a charity. Sometimes it leads to a data dive. Other times it leads us to send some charities to other organizations. For example, if they have questions about their CRM technology, we're not able to help, but there are other, we can send them towards someone else. Of course, data dives is the main things we do. Data dives are weekend events. They consist of, say, approximately 20 volunteers, data scientists, data analysts, depending on what the data dive is about. We bring them together. There is a preparatory phase for a data dive, which is 6 weeks before the dive, where a data ambassador, who is another volunteer, helps prepare the data and the questions with the charity. And then this is in order to maximize the time for the weekend, to maximize the chances we get a positive outcome from the weekend. And then within the weekend, there is everyone comes together and tries to answer as many questions as possible from the ones that the charity had using their data. We tend to do dives, by the way, once per quarter, at least, and maybe at a minimum with one charity. We try to bring more than one charities in. Then we have data corps events, which are less frequent. These are longer term events. And if the data dive has the objective to provide the first packet of insight or a hacky deliverable, then the data corps is a more a project that needs to sort of go into production or be more polished. They take around 6 months to a year. They take 2 to 3 volunteers that sort of work not full-time with the charity, but say at a minimum of 2 hours per week with them, in order to create a dedicated end result. Could be a dashboard or a model or something that the charity can take from their data. We recently started Social Data Society, which is a peer network of people that, as me, that work in charities. Some charities have data scientists and analysts, and those people, some of those people are our volunteer with DataKind, and they needed a way to connect. Social Data Society is that construct that brings data aware people together that work in the social sector. Last but not least, we are interested in responsible data. This started, you might have heard of ethical data science, which is quite trendy lately. We started around 3 years ago with our principles. And then we started this ethics committee that I was part of. The goal with what we're trying to do is we're trying to embed processes within what we do to ensure that the work we do is not only ethical, but essentially maximizes the good we want to do and eliminates as much as possible any harm. So, for example, we're thinking a little bit more about what to work on, what projects to take in, what data is appropriate to use. But similarly, embedding some checks within the processes we have to catch some of the problems early on. And that's about it. So what about data science? In case you don't know, this is the only slide about data science. Data science is a combination of a couple of things. To a certain extent, it could be only math and statistics, as far as I'm aware. I would actually blame the math and statistics department if that's not the case. There's definitely a level of programming needed to do data science nowadays. So that's the other part of the question that data scientist brings in. There's also some relaxing of the assumptions that statistics hold sometimes, but at its core, it's the combination of math and statistics with some programming, and often bringing in some domain expertise, which the domain expertise can come in from, in our case, the charity that comes in and works with us. It can come in from a stakeholder if you're in an organization, but it can also come in from the data scientist. If you worked in a particular set of problems for a long time, then you might be bringing in some domain expertise yourself. So I'm going to now transition into some examples of projects we've done with Datakinds. Now there is a caveat to those projects, and that is that I haven't participated in those projects myself. DataKind does a lot of projects, and not all volunteers take part in all of them. So the list from this presentation is not from the projects I've participated. I have read though what happened to the projects, and I'm going to try to bring justice to what happened. So this caveat is so that I can set then you can then understand why I cannot answer some of the questions you might have. But over the years, as we work with DataKind, we've identified some themes of interest for charities working with us, some areas where help is needed more than others. And this is starting from understanding the need and the demand. As you know, charities offer services to a particular set of people that have a particular need. A lot of charities want to understand what is the demand for their services. This is either to ask for more funding, to get more people in, or if they have more people in, to reallocate resources so they can serve that demand. But similarly, the need that they serve, a charity often starts with a particular need they want to serve, but as they start serving a population, that might change. And it is often the case that they want to revalidate that the needs that for the people that they serve, that they cover services for the needs they have. Another big group of requests comes under the theme of understanding this population that they serve. Similarly to what I said before, a charity probably starts with an assumption about what clients they want to serve, what people they want to serve. But as they start providing services, they often find themselves representing different or more people than what they initially thought. And that's good, but what they want to understand is what is the profile of these people, what are the problems, as we said previously, but also who are they, and just understand them better so that they can provide better services. Of course, unsurprisingly, the biggest request is about evaluating services. All charities want to know how well they're doing. That's understandable, and to a certain extent, they already do something on that front. They either know experientially, they do provide their services on a day-to-day basis, or they have some way that they collect that feedback, maybe through a survey. But what they want to know is, first they want to validate that their intuition aligns with the data, but also maybe there is an area that they can improve on, that either has escaped them or they want to validate through the data they have. And lastly, a little bit less often, but of course, again, as we would expect, data science is a lot about automation sometimes. So there is an area of requests that deals with improving operational efficiency of a charity. And either through an automation or some assistive technology or through another way, but this to a certain extent is a little bit less often, mainly due to the fact that it does require some data or digital maturity from the part of the charity in order to be able to use those tools effectively. So the first example is from a charity called Homeless Link. They provide services to people that are rough sleeping. Essentially, they created an app called StreetLink. And StreetLink and this app was helping people report whether they think some people might be rough sleeping. And essentially, they wanted to know whether those referrals that came in from the app that they've created correlated to a certain extent with the reality of how many people were out in the streets. But what we ended up finding through the dive was a little bit of the opposite message, or at least some counter insight, which was that the referrals correlated almost perfectly with their Twitter activity and the weather pattern. So when Homeless Link tweeted about either the app or their ability or the weather was cold, for example, you might think more referrals came in. Of course, this is not very helpful because this either overestimates or underestimates how many people are sleeping. Either when the charity tweets and the weather is cold, people actually report accurately, or you can make the opposite argument as well. But the main point was it didn't serve. It didn't seem to serve their. This was evidence that it didn't seem to serve their initial need, which was to potentially capture how many people were out better. So that was the main insight. Then there's another example. Battle UK is a charity which provides supports for families and young people. The data they had was mainly qualitative. So they had the 10-year worth of data from people they've helped. And the help comes in a couple of instances. So you might ask for help in one point in time and then ask again. And the data was qualitative in the sense that the support worker wrote a report of what the situation was every time the help was asked. So this was the data that was analyzed. And the graph, which you can see, which was the main insight, was what sequence of themes of help did people ask more often. So for example, we can see that domestic abuse correlated came after, before, having some problems with homelessness, and same with estrangement, or similarly, domestic abuse correlated with issues around child health. And the way the charity wanted to found that information useful is because some of these things came in before others, and they could intervene earlier into the problems that families had in order to prevent some of the follow-up issues that could potentially arise. So that could ended up had the potential to be very informative. Another charity was Mind, which is a charity that it's a consortium of charities, as far as I'm aware. It consists of a lot of branches. This is with one of their branches, and they offer mental health services. So the main insight, one question which is not in the graph was what was the conversion rate of using their services for a particular population that they serve. First of all, Mind serves a very diverse set of in the community due to what they do. They offer mental health services, and mental health services are not for a particular group, a particular population segment. So the people they help are very diverse. And one thing they wanted to know was the conversion rate based on the different people they served, which they found that, for example, young males, which were Asian or Blacks, had lower conversion rates for one reason or the other. I mean, this needed more investigation. But also, interestingly, similarly, they brought in census data within during the dive, and they found that some population segment, in particular Nigerians and Kurdish people, were overrepresented. This was again interesting. Maybe it was because of some word of mouth for their services, but But the main insight was the thing in the graph, which was that unlike what you would expect, as I was saying, the mine serves a very diverse community, and diversity is usually a good thing. But in this particular case, as we can see, the percentage of attendance in a group that they offer the services was dropping the more diverse the group was. And this came up again and again, however the data was cut. Like as if it was saying, and I'm not trying to offer an explanation, I'm just saying, like as if it was saying that people that are vulnerable might need a more homogeneous group to feel safe and get support. But again, this needs further investigation. Another example is from Luamao, who is a charity, a Welsh charity that deals with youth homelessness. They wanted to know which part of their the people they serve was getting more or less value from their services. And what they found was that young males that were caregivers were the subgroup that was getting the least from their services. Of course, this doesn't tell us why. I mean, this again is more investigation, but they had some theories about what that is, and they wanted to investigate. For example, they were saying that most of their support workers were women, so maybe male need, maybe they needed to hire more male support workers so that they are positive role models for the people in need. Or maybe as well, they were saying that or that particular subgroup needed more time with their services in order to get what other subgroups were getting. So just to interact with them for a longer period of time. And the other last example about operational efficiency was, all the other examples were data types. By the way, this is a data corps project, maybe because to do such a project requires a little bit more time. But Welcome Center is a charity which is a food bank. What they've noticed before the dive is a lot of people were becoming dependent on the food they were providing. And of course, this was running counter to what they wanted to achieve. They wanted to help people that for some reason they were in need at a particular given point in time, but they wanted to get them back on track and not get them dependent on what they provided, of course. So what they did was what they had was referrals for people needing their services, and they wanted to quantify. They wanted to create a score that quantified how dependent these people were. So every referral counted as something positive, and every gap in a period of time, because you can imagine in the 52 weeks of the year, every time that you asked for services, you might have asked for 100 times, like every day or every 2 days. But every period of time that they didn't ask for help from Welcome Center acted as a positive, as a negative. So they had a score which was a combination of how often services were asked and how many periods of not asking for services existed as well, which was good. And they tried to predict that with a machine learning model. They used the random forest model. They used a serverless AWS Lambda infrastructure to deploy it, all of which were quite interesting technical implementation details as well. But what was even more interesting was the fact that they were able to sort of a little bit slow down that referral per client upward trend. So more and more people asking for more and more referrals, essentially. So that was that. And I want to close with some things we've learned over time working with charities, some of which you might find interesting, others might be more tailored for another charity. But this would be our 5 top tips. from what we've learned. I'm going to go through them one by one. The first is that it's not really about the data. Maybe you've seen it yourself differently, but what we mean by that is data is just a tool, is not a silver bullet. It doesn't contain the solution to the problems that the charity is facing. And what's more important is the mindset, like a charity having a mindset, the culture within the charity, having people that ask questions or having people that are able to answer the questions are usually more important than the data, which might or might not be there. I mean, if you have the people asking the questions or the right questions or wanting to act according to the data, then chances are you will start collecting the right data. And the other way around, if you have data, it's highly likely that they might not answer the questions that are important for you necessarily if you don't have the right mindset. Then there is data maturity. So we've started 2 years ago measuring that as we've set up a little bit, we wanted our own way to evaluate how well we're doing, and data maturity seems to be what we use, but it's also helpful for charities as well. So we've set it up a goal to increase the data maturity journey of the charities we help. We hope that after they do a project with us, either a data dive or a data corps, they will end up being more data mature. And we measure that in 7 different components. So for example, you might have leadership that understands data, but you might not have the skills, or the other way around, or you might not be having the right data. But this is a framework we use, and it's a survey that charities fill, but people can use it at their own organization as well, in order to measure what is the data maturity of the startup of the charity before and after interacting with us. Of course, it's really important for us to use data responsibly. There are a couple of ways you can do that. I guess the more interesting thing to say is that you don't need to do a lot of things to do that. But it's important that people start doing that instead of not doing it. So I would say this is more about people doing, thinking about things that can go wrong with their data than it is about bringing in some experts or doing some complicated processes. For example, simply asking what can go wrong using the data you have, or whether you have representative data. And there are a couple of checklists online or frameworks like the ones that are in the slide, which are pretty simplistic. So for example, a set of 12 questions you can answer that can get you started. And even if you do that simple sort of checklisting, you will be far better than most other places. I guess the biggest thing that charities, but also I would say in the industry, is not happening, is that you can actually start doing data science immediately. You don't necessarily need a data scientist. As we were saying in the first tip, the right mindset needs to be in place. I mean, if you start asking questions, you can probably answer them with Excel, and you can then run into some problems, and you might need a dashboard, and you might run into some problems, and you might need machine learning. But chances are, if you're not doing any of those things, you can definitely start by doing some of those. Possibly there are some people within the organization, definitely some of those that approach us tend to have some interest in data, and they could upskill themselves and do some data analysis themselves. So rather than having to wait or think about it or being afraid, we find that people can start from where they are right now without needing to do a lot of things. And lastly, the most important thing and what we're trying to do with DataKind is make the case for data, right? What is the value that data can bring into an organization? I mean, to a certain extent, that's what we do as data scientists when we go into a place as well. If it doesn't have a central team or a mature culture, we're trying to make the argument about how data science or data in general can add value to the organization. within Datakind, we're trying to do that with data dives, presenting some way that data can add value. Of course, with data corps or with office hours, but probably the most important thing is showcase what is the return on investment of doing that. So if you want to work or volunteer with us, or if you're in a charity that wants to do a project with us, we're always open. We have a couple of volunteers, but we always need more. And we have some projects, but we're always keen to help. So contact us. These are our details. I hope that you find the presentation useful, and I hope I will be able to answer some of your questions. But that was it.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was absolutely fascinating. If you want to stop sharing the screen, perhaps we can ask Matt to share, if he doesn't mind, what he's made of that, because you crammed a lot into that presentation. So are you all right to share, Matt? Oh, I think he's on mute.
I am, but thank you very much for the invitation, Nicola. And I'm sure that Glenn or spotlight, because he usually does, and it usually works a treat.
Wow.
And then I can walk around. So traditional apologies, because I will have missed some things, no doubt. And I'll just change colour so we can walk around. Nick started by talking about what DataKind does, and Data Dive's got a mention, which is their beginning and building capacity for charities, which is their purpose. And he listed some of the things they do: the hackathons, the weekend hackathons, the daily office hours, the walk-in help, everything's local, community-based help, collaboration by default or by purpose, which is marvelous, and Data Corps, which is the more serious 6-monthly or annual investigation of work. And it's behavior change for charities and businesses and institutions. There was a nice characterization of data science where it sits somewhere between technology skills or hacking and maths, and then sector specific expertise. So it works everywhere. And then Nick helpfully walked through some of the things that charities typically need: understanding in the first instance, evaluation of services, and then improving operational efficiency typically. And then he helpfully listed some particular examples: unlocking existing assets, perhaps often cleaning it, which has come up during the week at some of the previous events. And then he listed Buttle and Mind and Lamau in Wales, and some connections with things like census data and openly operating public data or open data, which obviously is a good thing. I think then the real value was right at the end in the tips or principles. Mindset being key. Ask yourself the right implicit hard questions. Where are you? The data maturity assessment. So a benchmark for beginning something and then revisiting it. So that's our process that goes round and round all the time. Interesting that the ODI data ethics canvas was cited, came up obviously earlier in the week. Responsible data use. And again, similar to point one, really start or acknowledge where you're working from and make the case for data science. That's it.
Perfect. That is fabulous. Thank you, Matt. That's a really good visual representation of all the stuff and a really good reminder. And we will be sharing these with everybody who has signed up to these events. So thank you for that, Matt. So Nick, if you're ready, we've got a few questions here. So we'll get through as many as we can in the time we've got available. My question you answered, you were so organized, because I actually work with a couple of charities and I'm thinking, wow, they could really use your help. How do I get them involved? And you've already shared the details, so I don't need to ask you my question. So one of the first questions we had was, what technology is behind some of the analysis that you're doing? So it looks like it might be a graph database, was the comment.
It's a good question. Well, it depends on the volunteers. We are technology agnostic to a certain extent. We do attract volunteers that have knowledge in closer to the question and the domain of a particular dive. For example, if the dive is mainly about visualization, we're going to bring in people which have done data visualization more than others. Or if the dive is about natural language processing, we're going to bring people that are doing that in their day job more than others. But we are technology agnostic. So sometimes people come in and, as you said, they use graph databases. Other times they use Excel. They can use Python or R. They can use Alteryx. We've seen everything. As long as they can share the data, the insights that they've created, in a way that's understandable. We don't care very much what is the technology that they've used.
Excellent. So basically, you don't say to anybody, we can't work with you because you're not using whichever technology. You're flexible.
Definitely, we don't say that. Yeah.
Excellent. That's really good. So I think another thing that was occurring to me, and I saw somebody put the question in there, is obviously when you're doing this kind of analysis, you're dealing with a lot of personal data because of the very nature of the fact that you're working with charities. How do you manage to protect the personal data when you're doing this kind of analysis?
That's a great question. We actually care about that. As I mentioned in the presentation, we want to do things right. And there was an example which I didn't comment about, which was the one with the qualitative data from the charity that had that insight, which looked like a graph for domestic abuse and stuff. This was text, and sometimes it mentioned names of people or locations that they lived or they. So what we did was we anonymized it, mainly automatically, but then also going manually. Automatically in that case by recognizing the entities of people, organizations, locations that mentioned, emails, phone calls, phone numbers, and removing everything that we could find automatically, but then also going through them manually to ensure that we didn't leave anything behind.
So it sounds like you're being very thorough. You have to. So that's good to know. So I don't know whether you're familiar with the DAMA wheel.
Am I familiar? I don't think so. Maybe
this next question might be interesting then, which is how might the DAMA wheel fit into the Venn diagram that you showed? So I've got to get my teeth in. A statistician hot topic now is RAP, reproducible analytic pipelines. So data management is rightly a core part of scientific method of data science. So as it happens, I can share my screen because I did have the DAMA wheel on a slide for a presentation I was doing yesterday. Let me see, I'm pretty sure I've still got it open. Not there at the moment. Sorry, it was a good idea while it lasted. Oh, there it is. Let me try again. And then you can put you on the spot to have a look at it. So if I do that as a presentation. So DAMA, being somewhat biased, being representing DAMA, has a data management body of knowledge, and it has a chapter on all of these data management disciplines, basically. So I think the question from Andrew was basically, how do you see this fitting with your lovely Venn diagram that you showed you with data science earlier?
That's a good question, right? So some of the things here seem not necessarily to be purely data science, maybe in my mind.
Definitely not.
And I think that's okay. I think it does a good job of summarizing a couple of different things that are data related. But for example, as a data scientist, I don't deal with a lot of these things. And maybe that's where it fits. It fits a little bit outside of the diagram.
Yeah. But no, I realized that was definitely putting you on the spot, but thank you for having a look at that. And I'm, as being a DAMA person, quite happy to share that with you afterwards if you're interested. It's all over Google, you can find that easily. So thank you for that, Nick. So the next question we've got is that, you've been sharing lots of great data visualizations. Is that because you found that's a better way to get your findings shared and understood by the charities that you're working with?
Yeah, I think maybe it's the only way, but I can hardly think of. I mean, first of all, 100% we use visualization more often than not. For that exact reason, charities are not necessarily very data mature, and that's okay. That's that's why they come to us. But this also comes up in places where people are data. in the place I work, where there is engineers and data scientists and analysts. Even in those cases, graphs are often better at communicating. For example, what an embedding is or what the model is trying to do, than throwing an equation in the slide.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It's definitely, I'm not a data scientist, but in my field, I find that diagrams are far better. People can get their head around them. So I think that's really interesting. And the next question was actually around the same topic. Was, when you're sharing, you've got different styles of graph and visualization that you were sharing in the examples. So how do you decide the most suitable data visualization design for each analysis or project?
That's a hard one. I personally, not as part of DataKind, have particular opinions about what visualizations are helpful and instructive. There is certainly there are certainly some books on that and a lot of material. I'm not an expert though, so I can only say that you can either follow some of those some guidelines from people that are experts, but there are conflicting opinions. But in our case, DataKind, going back to DataKind, as we were doing with the tools, we are a little bit agnostic because we rely mainly on our volunteers, or at least at the moment, we don't restrict them on what they can use to visualize. We mainly rely on their ability and knowledge to decide both what tool they will use to produce the visualization and how that visualization will look. We don't, that said though, during the dive, there is a live feedback from the charity and the ambassador. So sometimes this can change according to the feedback, but often it stays close to where it started.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not an easy answer for that one, but no, it's good. It's good to know. So we have actually, well, I would say perhaps easier questions to finish off, and we still got plenty of time. So have you worked with any cultural or heritage charities?
As far as I'm aware, I think I saw that question. I was wondering how we, I had some time to think about it, but I cannot remember. I think the charities we've worked with at DataKind UK, I think they're listed to a certain extent in the website, including the examples you saw as case studies. So if you're interested to know more about those projects or other projects, I think you can find them in our website.
Excellent. People can go and look. But I wonder if that's because somebody works for that type of charity and is wondering whether to approach you for help. So we also have a question here. You were asking for volunteers and somebody said, do you work with MSc students as volunteers?
Of course, yeah, 100%. We also work with people that are not data scientists, just to further expand. In case people think that you need a particular set of skills. Of course, we do need the volunteers to have certain skills, but as I was saying previously, right? If someone knows Excel, so for example, he's an economist, or even if they're project managers, sometimes they can bring in some quantitative insight into the process. Sometimes we invite even those volunteers in. So an MSc student in a relevant domain or even in a not so relevant, 100%.
Excellent. That's really good to know. And I think that was really good what you said about, people who they might not be fully fledged data scientists, but as long as they've got some relevant skills. And what better way to try, if that's something you want to get into, to get involved and get some experience. So yeah, I think that's brilliant.
A lot of people, to be honest, a lot of people come in for that extra experience. Including myself when I started. I was just starting, and it was a great way to see more problems and data. But that's 100% okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a win-win, isn't it? Everybody gets to benefit from that. So I think that sounds brilliant. So another one to kind of put you on your spot. What is your favorite data pipeline platform?
I also saw that, and I was wondering, right, like what is, so in my work, we use, first of all, Python and something similar to Airflow, if that's what's being meant. First of all, at DataKind, I don't think we use, as I said, any particular platform. And even in my experience, this has changed over time. And there are a couple of different tools that other organizations where I've worked have used. And I don't have a personal preference. No. I'm happy to work with either.
So it's more about the data for you rather than the tools.
For the data pipeline platforms, but as I said, I use Python, and I use the Python specific ecosystem, if that's what was meant.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So the next one's an interesting one, because this is comes definitely from, I didn't ask it, but it's more from my background, being a bit of a data governance geek, is that, obviously your analysis is only as good as the quality of the underlying data. So, that's one of the things I always say to, if I'm talking to clients who are very immature in data and they go, oh, we want to do data science, and you're going, you don't even know what data you've got. You don't know if it's good enough yet. But somebody's actually asked a really good question here about what frameworks do you use or do you look at when you're resolving data quality issues when you're looking at data?
That's a great question, but I have to say again that I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not an expert on that. I work in natural language processing, and in that area, I guess two things are true. First, if you clean the data correctly, then that has an impact in performance. But there are also some models that work quite well even if you don't do that cleaning. So I sort of have always chose to do the latter. And I think also there are not, into my awareness, great tools around data cleaning. So whenever I had to do data either cleaning or assessing the quality, I had to do it a little bit manually. So go to the data. And again, in the sector I'm in, there is a tool which is called Prodigy that we use for annotation. So for me, I would actually go for an annotation tool to assess the quality, to understand what sort of things need to be removed or disregarded, but with a caveat that I haven't done it very much, and I don't think there is a perfect tool for that in the domain I work.
Okay, no, that's really good to know. Thank you for sharing that, Nick. And then I think the final question we have here is, can you recommend any books? And I assume that they mean perhaps on data science, but maybe visualization you were mentioning earlier as well.
There is a book about visualization, and I cannot remember the name. So I might get back to you on maybe with the title. But for data science, I think again for data science, I found that there are two groups of people: those that learn with books and those that learn with projects. I thought I was the one that was learning with books more, and I have a lot of books, but I actually have found myself to have skim read the books and mainly learn from the projects I've done. But I would advise to pick a book that is specific to what you're trying to do. For example, I wanted to learn SageMaker from AWS, which is a particular machine learning as a service platform. There is a book for that. In that type of book, you can easily, for me, right? Maybe others, they like more theoretical books. But I find if you're working on something that, like, for example, that particular technology, or similarly, there's another book about how to improve the efficiency, which is quite important in machine learning, how to make the algorithms go faster, use less memory. And so there is a high performance computing book for Python as well. So because I'm actually doing that on my day-to-day, I have found to be able to follow that easier. But there are other great books like Effective Python if you want to improve your Python. and many more that I haven't read, like Data Science for Business, probably a good one if you're getting started.
Excellent. That is really helpful. Thank you, Nick. We've got one question, but I think it's probably for me, not for you. There's a curveball. So can we confirm how attendees will be able to access the videos, even if they're not currently members of BCS or DAMA? So on DAMA, I believe they will go on the members only part of the website. But I probably ask Glenn to confirm, but I believe the BCS Data Management Specialist Group YouTube channel is not private. I think it's available publicly, so you can go and catch up with the videos there. Yeah, so that has been so useful and so interesting, Nick, and I do hope that we get you some more volunteers as a result of this. And we've got a couple of minutes, so I don't know, Matt, are you happy to share your second illustration from Nick's questions? He is indeed. Great. So if you want to unmute yourself, I'm sure Glenn will spotlight you so we can see what you've been up to.
Thanks. So just briefly, you can see just capturing some of the answers that Nick's been giving to the questions. I don't think I can add much. Flexibility was absolutely key, technology agnostic, and Nick acknowledged the challenges of volunteer organisations at that point, which is also very germane. Then there was the interesting conversation about the DAMA wheel, which looked very interesting, and because it started to introduce some of the broader issues that other webinars this week have discussed, and which you can see in the recordings. And then there was something that we were very pleased to see about the importance of communication and visualization. And often it's very simple answers at that stage. And there was a really useful line here. It's absolutely multidisciplinary, the work that Nick's discussed and answered questions on. And you have to be able to pull in expertise from other places, which makes you think about collaboration, I suppose.
Absolutely. That is fabulous, Matt. Thank you. I can't even draw a stick man really well, and you've done this amazingly on the fly during the session. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So I think somebody's put, can I recommend any data governance framework? So that's not a 3-minute answer. But, I would go and look at my YouTube channel, and you'll find there's a video there on data governance frameworks, and that will answer your question, because I don't want to detract from Nick and his session here. But thank you so much again, Nick. Thank you, Matt, for capturing that so fabulously. And yeah, thank you all for joining. I hope you have found it really, really useful and as interesting as I have. And please, if you're free, remember to use the same link that you joined this one on to join the panel debate at 4 o'clock. And if you think of any other questions that you wish you'd ask Matt, because that always happens to me when things are over, Nick's coming back kindly to do the panel debate later, so you always get a chance to come and ask him another question later. So thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you later. Bye.